Okay, welcome members and guests to the June 26th virtual meeting of the Suburban Chicago Apple users. I'm your host and president of Suburban Chicago Apple users, Dave Ginsburg. Today our speaker is SCAU member and tech support tutor, Margaret Martin. So who are we? The Suburban Chicago Apple users is a group of over 100 Apple users based in Chicago, but now we are virtual and meetings available all throughout the US, who offer help, tips, and embrace passion of Apple technology, as well as enjoy great presentations from speakers from the Apple community. You can visit our website at myscau.org, where you can find out more about us. And if you're not a member, you can join us for a membership there on that website. For those of you who are live, please make sure that you mute your mics during this time and turn off your video at this time as well. If you have any questions during the presentation, please enter those questions into the chat. We have moderators that are also going to be moderating this meeting, and we'll get the questions to our speaker for you as well. And we also plan having an afterglow after this meeting today at after 11:30 our time, and we'll be able to have an open discussion about anything you want to talk about as far as tech goes. Now I'd like to introduce our speaker. Margaret Martin provides technical support and tutoring for Apple products in people's homes and businesses. A Mac owner since the biochemistry degree justified the purchase of a Mac SC30. Margaret also builds websites for small businesses and nonprofits. She lives in the Northeast Illinois area and has 2 rescue cats and lots of chewed cables. You can find her at her website, bungalowtech.com. And I would like to please give a warm welcome to Margaret Martin. Take it away, Margaret.
All right, thank you. I've got to start out here by sharing my screen. And I'm going to do the whole desktop today because we're going to be doing some demonstrations. But before we do that, we are going to start with a few slides. And I know you guys are probably used to me showing you lots and lots of slides. There won't be that many today. In talking about Apple contacts, we have to get some things straight. First, what is the Contacts app itself? It's a database. Well, okay, so what does that have to do with anything? Why am I telling you it's a database? This has some particular effects, especially to do with syncing of data. A database is very different than, say, a word processing document. And this kind of database especially allows you to look at data coming from multiple sources. And oftentimes those multiple sources are constantly being synced. So that's going to have some effects when we talk about maintenance of your database and also sorting out problems of your database. So keep that in mind. Data integrity, especially in syncing, is going to be different in this kind of application. As I mentioned, you can look at data from multiple sources, and a database in this regard can create confusion when you have multiple accounts. In other words, it can be hard to tell if you're looking at a particular contact, which account it comes from. And this is mostly important, again, when you're trying to troubleshoot problems. And finally, databases are important because of the terminology. There are some very general words that mean very specific things when talking about databases. And today I'm going to use 2 of those extensively. And I just want to give you a little review of them so we're all on the same page for this talk. The 2 technical terms we're talking about here are fields and records or entries. This is a screenshot I took of data from a contacts database that is perhaps in a more familiar format, which is just a spreadsheet. In this case, the record or entry is a row in the spreadsheet. That is, the person or the business is on a single row, and each field in the database is a column. So a field could be phone data or address data or first name, last name. Those are called fields. And how this maps to the Contacts app is pretty straightforward. The middle column here shows the record or entries in the database. And when one is highlighted, you can see the fields that have data in this database. That's all I'm talking about. That's all you need to know: records and entries and fields. There are a bunch of caveats when we're talking about contacts, or I should say the contacts app. First one is a big one. Sharing a single contacts database is hard to do, and for very good reason. This has to do with sync. It also has to do with Apple's philosophy about one person equals one Apple ID. And there are ways you can work around this. We can talk about this later in the sort of more open section of my talk today. But generally, I'm going to encourage you not to do this. You need a really good reason to share a single contacts database with another person. And by sharing, I'm talking about continuous sync, not just a one-time exporting of data and giving somebody else your data. I'm talking about keeping it in sync here. Caveat number 2, Apple's aversion to data loss results in duplication. And that means anytime Apple senses a problem with your data, it panics and makes a copy of it. And this is why so many of us have duplicates, triplicates, quadruplicates of contacts in our database. And problems arise frequently in syncing or when you're making massive changes. And this is when you create duplication. And we're definitely going to talk about this because we got several questions related to cleaning up duplicates in the contacts app itself. This is a big caveat that I discovered when I was preparing for this talk, and how much the features differ depending on what platform you're using. My demos today will mostly be using the Mac because it's the most fully featured. It is the oldest program. It used to be called Address Book back in the day on the Mac. And I am going to look at iCloud.com to show you what that interface looks like, because it can be useful when you don't have a computer nearby, but you need to get access to what's on Apple servers. And if we have time, I will connect up an iPad to the same account and we can take a look at how it looks there. But I'll be referencing the iPhone and iPad as throughout the talk, but most of the features are available on the Mac. So if you find yourself trying to do something and you can't, it could be simply because you're trying to do it on the phone and that feature does not exist. Caveat number 4, related to this, you need a Mac to do major surgery. Now, you don't have to use this Mac permanently with your contacts data. You just need it during the time you're going to really clean up big problems. It makes everything so much easier, and you have access to all the tools you're going to need to do this cleanup. Cleaning things up on your phone is more of a maintenance thing, but I'm talking about major surgery here. You're definitely going to need a Mac. All right, so that's it for slides. Quick today. Let's take a look at the contacts app itself. I'm going to hide others. All right, so here we have a very familiar interface for everyone, I'm sure. Just a quick look here at all these records. You can see, lots of duplicates. Some of those I created by hand for this demo, but a lot of them appeared when I was monkeying with data. Apple just duplicated them for me in the process, and I thought I would leave them today for our demonstration. So over here on the right, I want to show you a couple of features here about how you can make contacts work better for you. A little customization that might help. Don't know why this is popping up. All right, everyone can see my screen, I assume.
Yes.
See the contacts thing? All right, my interface changed there briefly. So customization and some tricks that you may not be aware of, and some caveats. And after we get through that section, which will be about maybe 20 minutes max, then I'm going to go into specific questions that people sent in advance. I'm going to talk generally about some of them and specifically about others, but please, if you have questions while I go, throw them in the context thing. I will stop and we can backtrack and discuss things.
I'll be monitoring.
Okay, so let's talk about some fun things I did here. You notice over here in the fields, we've got some different looking names here. These are custom labels for different fields. In this case, the phone. To create a custom label is very easy. You simply go into edit mode. And normally in this pull down, you would see your standard list. But if you notice at the bottom, there's a custom option. If you select that, you can type in any name for that label that you want. So I'm just going to type in test and you see how it's changed up at the top. I don't use this extensively. I do really like to use it for phone numbers, especially for businesses that might have multiple offices. And I need to know if I'm going to be texting the main office or if I'm going to be sending a phone call to somebody who is actually currently standing on my roof above me. I haven't had this with my roofer today, and I don't need to talk to them. I need to talk to the office, or vice versa. So it can be good for labeling specific locations. The nice thing about these custom labels is they do sync, so they will show up on all of your devices. And you can create custom labels in a very similar method on the iPad. And I believe you can also do it on iCloud.com. So iPhone, iPad, all of them have the ability to do these custom labels, and the labels themselves, and of course their data, will sync. The type of data that's held in each of these fields is specific to the type of field. So for example, home and work down here, these are designed to hold addresses. You can call them anything you like, but the data in them is going to be an address. There is one free-form field, which is at the bottom. And you can type anything you want into this note field. And I use this throughout my notes, throughout my contact database to hold relevant information about the record. So for example, I often mark my service providers like plumbers. And so let me show you that, how this becomes useful is not all of my plumbers have the word plumber or plumbing in their business name. So I can't just search for that and automatically find them. If I want to find all of my plumbers, can go up to the search field up here and type in, it's not going to let me, there we go. You notice one result here, and it's because I put the word plumber in the notes field, even though the name of the business, All Hands on Deck, does not have the word plumbing in it. There's no other indication on the card. If I put plumber in the notes field, I'll be able to easily find that. So I do this for my electricians, my plumbers, those services that I don't need all the time, and I'm likely to forget what the owner's name is or even the name of the business, but I can quickly get access to it when I'm in the middle of a flood, or if somebody asks me, hey, who installed your water heater? I want to hire them. I can quickly look up plumbers and notice that I have added the water heater data in the notes field. So I keep a spare amount of information for various service providers in the notes field, and I find it really helpful. But feel free to use it how you like. Sometimes I put in the names of people's pets because I want to remember their dog's name, or any kind of information that you want to recall about a single person or a business. All right, so that does it for customization of individual records. Let's take a look now at the left-hand pane here. You notice we've got sort of a number of categories. Let me zoom in here. So up at the top, if you select that, you're looking at all of your contacts. Below that, you see these words in gray. Those are the different accounts. The first three are the different accounts. They're fairly self-explanatory. iCloud, that's all your iCloud data. On my Mac, this is a special category for contacts that only exist on your Mac. In other words, they do not sync. Notice there's a Google account that I have added here. And at the bottom, there's something called Smart Groups. This is not an account. This is a second way of organizing your contacts data, which we're going to talk about in a moment. But first, let's look at these different accounts. The reason that this is really important is because having different accounts causes this confusion. To see which accounts and how they're being displayed in the Contacts app, you need to go into Preferences for Contacts. So I'll pull that down, we'll open up Preferences. Of course, I have to recenter this. If you notice in the tab here, there's an Accounts tab, and there are two listed here. If you temporarily don't want to see the data associated with an account, you can check that box and disable this account. It doesn't log you out, it just stops you from being able to see this data, which could be very handy when you're trying to figure out where all your contacts are coming from and where the duplicates being generated from. In addition, at the bottom here, you can select an account and actually remove it by clicking the minus button. This account's pane interacts with system preferences internet accounts, and depending upon which operating system you're running, it may look slightly different, but all the information sort of is replicated in system preferences. However, in system preferences, I don't believe you can disable and enable. Well, I suppose you can. You can stay logged into the main thing, but turn off various data types. So for example, Google, you could use only for mail, turning off all your contacts. You can do that in system preferences too. So as part of troubleshooting, I'm going to close this. When you're looking at all of your data, you want to say, well, I know I have a bunch of duplicates. Let's try and figure out where they are. That's going to be your first step. So by selecting, for example, all of your Google accounts, you can see, well, my duplicates aren't necessarily coming from Google. I do have one here, Morgan. Let's see if he's in iCloud too. Oh yeah, there's a Morgan in iCloud. So this one is probably, this name here is being duplicated that I can see in all contacts because one contact exists in iCloud and the other one exists in Google. Google's a really common place for duplication to occur because a lot of us have Gmail accounts and we may have inadvertently or on purpose turned on contacts for that account as well. So we're going to talk more specifically about further steps and how you can resolve duplicates, but I want to wrap up here by talking about groups. Groups are what is listed under each account name. So all of iCloud is technically a group. It's just everything, like we said. Then I have created some custom groups. For example, I have one called Holiday Card. These are all people that I send Christmas cards to, and I have them in here so I can select all of their names and either print out envelopes or print out address labels. And this functionality still exists on the Mac. They haven't gotten rid of it yet. The way I like to do it is to go in here and select one that's within the group. And then under the edit menu, there's a select all feature, Command A. And then if I choose to print this, we get this dialog box that comes up. The most important thing is to look at right here, style. We have several options. Well, 3, mailing labels, envelopes, and lists. If I select mailing labels, you can see now we've created a sheet of mailing labels with each of those addresses that was in the holiday list. So that's one sort of quick and dirty way to use groups, and that you might want to, you're using it once or twice a year perhaps, but it's nice to not have to rebuild that or to select those every time you want to print out mailing labels or in fact addresses. You can also print out what are called lists. This gives you a little bit more flexibility in, for example, I don't necessarily need to put photos on that list, but what I want is address, phone, and email. And you can go through and select all sorts of data on the fly, what you want it to print. And it prints out a nice format that's fairly easily read by humans. It's not great for importing into another application. That's exporting. We're going to talk about that later. But you can save it as a PDF as well. You don't have to print it. So if you want sort of a backup that's human readable, this is an easy way to get it. And of course, you can do this not just for holiday card, you could do that printing for your entire address book if you wanted. Related to this holiday card is there's a sort of a cheater way that I created that, and that's using this function called smart groups at the bottom. A smart group is essentially a persistent search. And what do I mean by that? Well, let me show you what happens when we go to edit this group, and you'll see what I've created here. So this smart group is showing us everything that that the card contains the word holiday card. And you have a bunch of options. You can say does not contain, et cetera, et cetera. And you can also do very specific searches. In my case, I want to look anywhere on the card. Does it use that word holiday card? Because I know I've thrown that in the notes. And so we're not going to change this one. I'm going to just say okay there. But this smart group will change anytime I go to iCloud and add holiday card to another contact, it will automatically appear in this smart group. So let me show you how that works. I think this is in iCloud. Yes, yeah. So I've added holiday card to this field. And notice one nice thing about notes is the notes field here, you can type in without going into edit mode, without clicking on this edit button at the very bottom. This is totally editable. No other fields are editable except the notes card without going into the edit mode. So it's really quick. You don't have to do any monkeying around to change notes. Let's go back now and look at holiday card, and Magellan has now showed up in that list automatically. Didn't have to drag any cards, didn't have to do anything, automatically populates. Great feature, does not sync anywhere else. It's a real bummer. Just like smart albums in photos don't sync to iPad or iCloud, these smart groups don't either. So my cheat is to keep this smart group running and then periodically select all, which is Command A, or under the edit menu, grab all of these cards and drag them over to my holiday card list. Notice it hasn't duplicated them in the holiday card list. It just added the missing ones. So it's kind of a cheat, a workaround, but at least this way I have holiday card everywhere I might want it. I throw that out. I don't know if these smart groups are ever going to be deprecated. In other words, totally gotten rid of. I really hope not. I really hope the opposite happens, that they start to appear other places. One final example of the utility of groups is when you're addressing email messages. So let's switch over to mail here. I believe I've got a new message ready to go. So say I want to mail to my group of people on the Saturday list. It's very easy. All I have to do is start addressing the email in the to field to Saturday. It will automatically start to try to match what I'm typing, just as it does with people. And if I click on this now, it will automatically fill in all those email addresses. So this is obviously good for groups, right? That group of people that you email maybe infrequently, but you need to make sure you get everybody. You don't forget one person. So doing it by memory can be a little fraught. It's easy to skip one person out of 14. And then there's an endless email chain as everybody tries to get caught up and get that person re-added to it. Better to create a group for your choral group or for your church group or for the nonprofit that you work with. That way you'll email everybody correctly. Now, one caveat to this is what happens when I have a person that has multiple email addresses? Which one is going to be used for this group mailing? Because some people have a work on a home and they really want you to use the right email address for them. You can easily see which email address is being used by clicking on this very tiny disclosure down arrow. And it will show you with the check mark that this address is the one that you want to use. If it's incorrect, you can easily change it. And I'll confirm that by saying, yes, this now has a check mark to it. So when this goes out to Torben, it will go to the correct email address. And of course, these are now just regular email addresses. You can delete or edit from here. But what if it's persistently giving me the wrong email address? Like I know Torben never wants to be emailed at that address. I always want to do the home one for this particular mailing list. There is a way to change that, which is really awesome. I did not know this existed. Under the edit menu in the contacts list, let's go up here, edit menu. There is a feature called edit distribution lists. It should be called edit group, but distribution list is the old term for this kind of thing. And if we select that, you will see this very old and very small interface that has not been updated for Big Sur, but it still works. And I'm going to blow this up so we can see it. Saturday is selected. Here are all my entries, and there's Torben with 2 of them. And you notice at the bottom, there's a little bit of a help. It says the bold highlighting indicates the information that is going to be used for this group. And in our case, we want to switch to this email address. Now that I've done that and I select OK, the next time I email that Saturday group, we check Torben, it's selected the first email address. It's fixed our problem. So hallelujah for that. If you use groups, this is a key thing to know is available. And I think that's all I have to say about sort of the interface and customizing and some of the edge cases here. Are there any questions on what I've covered so far?
Yes. Carol asked, I used to have an anniversary field that produced a reminder, not any longer. Can I get it back somehow?
Okay, so I'm not clear on which data syncs everywhere. In other words, what data for dates appear on the calendar and what don't. And I believe reminders for those things are controlled by the calendar. But let's take a look here. So let me show you what I'm looking at. So in this example, Torben has a date here. There is a gotcha date. And if we open up the edit mode, we can see that this gotcha date is an anniversary. This is not a birthday. And in my testing, the anniversaries did not show up on my calendar. And that meant there was no way for me to get a reminder about it. There is a birthday field above it. If you enter data there, it will show up on the calendar. And I believe in the calendar function itself, you can say, remind me about this birthday, you know, a week in advance, 2 weeks in advance, etc. I have not seen the same thing for anniversaries, what I think is a bummer, and wouldn't surprise me if that functionality went away. And I really hope it comes back. But because you can rename this anniversary to anything you want, it's possible that it's behaving differently. I have not done extensive testing on this, but I would recommend going in, checking to see that it's actually marked as an anniversary, and then checking in the calendar app itself to make sure you have it so that birthdays and anniversaries are turned on. That is a specific feature in the calendar app itself that you have to actually say, yes, show me the birthdays or not. And it might be specific to each platform. In other words, if you want to see it on your phone, you might need to go into settings on your phone. I'm not sure if that switch is there because I didn't do a lot of testing on the calendar app itself, but that's where I would start troubleshooting that.
Susan, if you want to unmute, go ahead and ask your question. If not, I'll go ahead and ask it. She asked, can you set the default?
I'm here.
Oh,
I had to find the unmute button on my iPad. I'm wondering about setting a different default for a particular person if they're in different groups.
Right. So
and have 2 email addresses, for example.
All right. So say again, you're talking about having 2 different people. Or
say a person has a work and a home address, and he's in this particular person is in a group for your work and a private club group of yours, and you want to use one address for his name in one group and another address for his name in another group.
Yes, you can do that. The groups are, they're not really moving any of the data. What they're doing is sort of adding them to the group listing. So one person can be in multiple groups, and each group has its own distribution list data. So remember, if we went up into the edit field here and we edited a distribution list, we got this interface. This is where you would select in the Saturday group, for example, that Torben wants to use this email address. But I could go down to the holiday group and find Torben and say, for this group, I want to use his other email address. So you can get very specific on your groups according to which email address they use.
How did we get to that particular little window?
Okay, so you have the group selected in the side.
Yeah.
And under the edit menu.
Yeah.
Edit distribution list.
Got it. Okay.
I don't know why it hasn't been changed to group. Like I said, hold over from the address book days.
Okay.
It's okay.
That answer your question, Susan?
Yes, it did. Thank you.
Thank you. Elda, if you want to unmute and go ahead and ask your question.
Hi, I just tried that edit distribution list using my Mac and nothing shows up on the list. And I tried with all contacts, I tried with all iCloud, I tried with a group, but every time I do it, I just get a blank window with 0 contacts for the distribution list.
for the distribution list, and the distribution list has how many members on it. Because remember, you have to have, I'm not sure iCloud is a distribution list. Let me see. Let's go back into edit distribution list. Yeah, iCloud is not a list, so you're not going to see any
Okay.
anything showing up there. You have to be actually selecting a list in this group. I really wish this window were bigger. I'm sorry, but you know, this is the Big Sur problem. So Catterday has a smaller, and they do show up. If
Okay.
this one only has one, I have found occasionally, I have seen very weird interface problems. And I hate to say it, but it's solved by quitting contacts and restarting contacts. Sometimes that's enough to fix this kind of problem. Sometimes you have to restart your Mac, but I would say groups, I believe, hang on, I forgot to check. I think this feature may only work. Sorry. I have to select a group here with iCloud groups. In other words, make sure you're not looking under other accounts. I believe you can also make groups in Google itself, and they may appear as lists. I did not have time to test this because I would have to make a bunch of additional dummy data in my Google account.
Okay,
But-
so I am looking at a group that has about 14 members in it, and it's a group under iCloud, and nothing comes up when I do that edit distribution list. But I should say that I just bought a new Mac and just did
Okay.
the migration yesterday, and maybe it has something to do with not all being populated yet.
It's very possible, and it could also have to do with Spotlight, index, and goodness pulling up this data. I would definitely say give it a couple of days to sort itself out before you
Okay.
contact me again, and then we go through this troubleshooting through email.
Well, it's just, I don't know
because
that I have the need to do that specifically,
Sure.
but when I tried it, it didn't work. So I thought I'd ask it now while I had a chance.
No, you're in the right place. It sounds like you're in the right place, and something
Yeah.
isn't working right.
Yeah.
This has been the story of the preparation. This talk, thing isn't working right.
Yeah. Okay. All right. Thanks.
And then Davis, you had a question or comment?
Yeah, Margaret, can you just go back and talk about groups just for a second? Because I don't have an issue with my groups syncing. So all of my groups sync across my iPhone, my iPad, and my Mac, but they were
Mhm.
all associated with my iCloud ID. So I'm
Mhm.
wondering if, because what I thought I heard you say was that groups don't sync.
Regular groups that appear under this list here on all iCloud sync. What doesn't sync are the smart groups.
Oh, the smart groups. Okay, I misheard you then. Okay, okay.
Yes.
Yeah,
It's
because
only
the groups that I've
fancy-
created under iCloud,
Mhm.
like instead of doing my smart groups, I created like a Christmas card list under iCloud that has
Mhm.
synced across all of my devices, so I can send out a group text message for Christmas or whatever, you know what I mean? But okay, so I misheard you. Okay, thank you for clarifying.
Yeah, and we can actually look quickly. This is a good segue. Let's take a look at iCloud.com. Many of you maybe have never logged into iCloud.com, but Apple has added quite a few different apps that are available. And I will put another caveat here. Different apps are available on different platforms. Understand why Apple won't let you look at iCloud.com in its full glory, like we're seeing here, on an iPad, but you can't. So try to do this from your iPad. You may not see all of these apps being available. I find that very frustrating because sometimes I want to go to iCloud.com because it's going to give me the clearest view of what data exists on Apple's servers. There's no other way to know for sure that you're looking sort of purely at what's in the cloud other than going to iCloud.com. But with that caveat in mind, let's go look at contacts here. And you can see all of my contacts, all of my duplicated contacts, but also under the all contacts listing, you see my groups have synced. And that is my expected behavior. Just so you are a little oriented, if you do look at contacts this way, we don't have our menu bar like we do for the contacts app because we're in a web browser. So the way you interact with most things is through the gear icon down here at the very bottom of the screen. The actions menu gives you what limited options you have. So for example, we could select all, and sorry, I have to move the zoom controls out of my way here. There we go. This plus at the bottom gives us two options. We can add a new group and add a new contact. With everything selected, we can do some things like exporting, for example, if we wanted to export these contacts. I have had mixed success with exporting on iCloud. The first several times I tried doing it, absolutely nothing happened. Then the second and third time, it exported not as vCard, which is a special format for contacts information, but it exported as a spreadsheet, which wasn't great, but at least the data was there. And the last time I exported, just yesterday, I ran through it again, it exported as vCards, downloaded them to my Mac, opened up contacts, and asked me if I wanted to import them, which is absolutely not what I wanted to do. I just wanted to make a copy of them, but somehow it was connected in to my Mac such that the download to my Macintosh, instead of downloading to the downloads folder on cloud, happens. I don't know what triggered that difference. I did nothing, except I will say that my Apple ID changed. This is my demo Apple ID, and it's possible it wasn't set up right earlier in the week. And the behavior I saw yesterday, in which it downloaded to my Mac, which triggered my Mac to say, oh, I recognize this content. Do you want to import it? Happened. I'm not clear on that. So be aware of this when you are working with iCloud.com. Things may behave differently from day to day, or they may not work at all, and you might get a silent failure. But this is, like I said, a good way to look at your data in the cloud when you're trying to troubleshoot things. All right, are there any other questions?
A lot of questions about duplicates. I assume you're going to be covering that shortly. So
Yeah,
I've told
that's
I've
what
told
we're
them
going to
that.
do next.
Yep.
I just wanted to make sure we sort of had the basics down before we got into the bigger issues here. All right, so we ready to talk about resolving duplicates?
And we knew that was going to be a big topic.
Big topic, yeah. And we got lots of duplicates here to resolve, and a bunch of information we have to understand. So we know duplicates happen often as a result of syncing. You can also inflict this damage on yourself by importing. It's all fine. But I will say the reason you need a Mac to sort this out is because this is the only platform for contacts that has a resolve duplicates functionality. And you can find that in the card menu at the very top. Near the top, it says look for duplicates. So let's run this now and see what happens. Okay, it found 9 duplicates. That may or may not be correct. Seems like it possibly have more than that. But our only option is to merge them, which I find really frustrating, because I want to know, did Apple's detection service really work? I want to be able to look at this and say, yes, this is the right data. I want you to merge all of these cards correctly, but we don't have an option to review it. You get 2 choices. You either cancel out of this or you let it do the merge. So let's let it do the merge and see what happens. All right, it definitely resolved quite a few of them. Certainly in iCloud, we're not seeing duplicates here. But if I go to look at all my contacts, I'm seeing duplicates, right? We have 2 for Juliet. One has a phone number, the other one has just a photo. And I'm seeing down here for Morgan, similar situation. This one also has a note in it. None of that got fixed. Well, maybe it's because when I selected resolve duplicates, I wasn't viewing all of them. I wasn't in all contacts. So let's run it again and see what happens. Look for duplicates. No duplicates were found, which I think is a lie because I'm looking at duplicates right now. And of course, what's happened is that this duplicate search is only happening on your Apple, quote, Apple data. So it's looking at data in iCloud and it's looking at data all on my Mac to find some of those duplicates. And in some cases, it still doesn't find them. It's supposed to look for example, this Juliet Forrest and Torben Martin. I know they also exist here. They are duplicates. And it's not pulling all of them down. So there's no other fix for that automatically. If you've got contacts that are being duplicated on multiple accounts, we have to do it sort of by hand. So that's what we're going to talk about next. How do you resolve this by hand? And there are some things that will definitely help you in this process. But let's take one step back now and talk about how you actually do this process. In other words, how do you protect yourself when you're doing major surgery? There are 2 steps before you even get to this point of resolving duplicates. The first one is make a backup of all your data. It's very easy to do. Select all, I like to select all contacts. I'm just going to duplicate everything. I don't care what account it's in. I'm going to, I don't know if you actually have to do this step to select everything in there, but it's how I've been doing my exports, just to really make sure it's selected all of my cards. And then under the file menu at the bottom, we have 2 export options. You can export as V cards, which is a format that typically is used for moving data around. So that's an okay way to back up your data for this. And certainly I would recommend maybe once a year, just exporting everything as a V card. But for our purposes today, we're actually going to make a contacts archive. This actually gives us a little bit more structure to the data. And we know for sure that Apple's Contacts app can import this data 100%. And we're going to go back to the starting point, because this is basically what we're going to use. If everything goes terribly wrong, we make a huge mistake when we're doing our surgery, we want to be able to go back to the beginning. And that Contacts archive is going to allow us to do that. So it creates a file name with has the date on it. I'm just going to throw it in my downloads folder. And it has the special extension here. If you view extensions in the Finder, you see it ends in ABVU. It's an old format starting from back in the address book days. This is our backup of data. So step 1, make a backup. Step 2, which I cannot do because it will stop my Zoom call, is to take that Macintosh off of the internet entirely. What we're trying to do today is major surgery on something that's syncing. We don't want to do that. We want to take the sync out of the equation here and do all of our changes. And then when we're happy our data is where we want it to be, then we will turn on our sync again. But unfortunately, there's no flip we can switch to stop syncing. Our only recourse is to take our machine entirely offline. So that means turn off your Wi-Fi up here in the top screen, turn off your Wi-Fi, unplug your Ethernet cable. Do that before you do major surgery on your contacts, and you'll have a much smoother experience. If you don't, if you do it live, as you're doing these big changes, you're going to start to see duplicates appear and disappear without you doing anything, which makes it really confusing and can give you a heart attack when you're in the middle of making big changes. Especially if you're trying to get rid of duplicates, to see more of them start to appear is really confusing. And it will all sort itself out eventually, usually right, but why go through that? Just take your computer entirely offline temporarily during this process. So you're going to be doing that anytime you do major surgery, not for routine maintenance, major surgery. All right. So we've made our backup. We're offline now. What do we do to sort out all these other duplicates that we're seeing? The first thing I tell people is figure out where the duplicates are coming from. Are they duplicated in iCloud? Well, we seem to have cleaned up most of those already. So they weren't duplicated in iCloud. If they are, and the duplicate function under the card menu, this look for duplicates, is not finding them, your only recourse is to do them by hand. And you notice it's grayed out here because I haven't selected 2 cards, but right above it is merge selected cards. That's what you would do if the automatic function isn't being hasn't found some of your duplicates in iCloud. You can select the ones that you know are duplicates and tell it merge the data on these 2 cards. If your data is being duplicated because you actually have an additional account, which is really common, then you need to look at that account and decide what you want to do with it. In my case, I've only got one record there, and I don't want to keep using the Google address book context data in the future. I'm actually going to turn that off. But if I turn it off now, I might lose important information. So what I'm going to do instead is import this data, even though I know it's a duplicate, into iCloud, and then I can run the find duplicates and clean up the mess I've created. So if you know you have a second account that a bunch of data that you may or may not want to keep, I would recommend you put it all into your main account. For most of us, that's going to be iCloud, and that's going to allow us to run the find duplicates. So you don't have to export and import if you're using a Mac, and that's why I like this feature. You should be able to just drag this contact over to iCloud. You notice we've got a little plus sign appearing, and that means that it's going to move that data over. And hallelujah, look what happens. Contacts was actually smart enough to recognize that this might be duplicate data. And instead of just saying merge, we're actually getting a chance to look at that data before we make a decision. And our option to look at it is review duplicate. If you know you just want to dump it in there, you can just say import, and then you'll have 2 cards. But in our case, we're going to review this duplicate. And I don't know how many of you have seen this. This was a blast from the past for me. Again, a really old interface back in the address book days. It made no sense to me when I first looked at it, even though I knew it was familiar. But let me walk you through what we're looking at here now. These 4 entries on the top are actually different buttons, essentially. And by default, what it usually shows you is the updated view, which is the one over here on the right. I'm going to look at keep both because I think this explains what's going on. We have the old data on the left and the new data on the right. This allows us to look at both cards and decide which one we want to keep. If I know that the quote old data, which may actually be newer, but it's old to this computer system based on the fact that we're dragging this new card into on top of the old data. If I decide the old data is what I want to keep, it's more complete or it's more recent actually, I can choose select old. Let's look at them both again. If I decide new is the more correct information, I can choose select new. I can choose to keep both, in which case it will now create 2 cards for that person, or now update, which is what it had said it would do by default, will actually combine the information. So I have both the email and the information in the notes field. However, you notice the photo is gone. I have no idea what's going on with photos. It's a relatively new thing in address book. And it seems like anytime you do major changes by importing and finding duplicates and that kind of stuff, photos are the most likely bit of data to be lost. Me personally, I'm willing to lose that data because I don't use it for most accounts, or sorry, for most entries in my database. And it's something I can easily recreate. All of the other data, I've never had any problem with data loss in this. This is the one thing that's a little odd because there definitely is a photo on that old one, but it appears that it's going to be wiped out when I do the quote update. In our case, we've here just dragged one card over, so we're only seeing one card. If you drag multiple cards over, at the bottom, you'll see additional buttons, which aren't showing up here, and you can step through each card and make this decision for each card as you go. And once you've made all your selections, you would select import down here at the bottom, and it will import that data. Now notice it hasn't deleted it from Google. This is strictly an import. It hasn't removed the data from the original count, but we should now see in iCloud, if it has worked as expected, the combined data. And the photo, for what it's worth, is still there, even though it seemed to indicate it was gone. But that's some of the trickiness associated with this. So resolving duplicates can happen within a single account, or sorry, duplication can happen within a single account. It can also happen across multiple accounts. So your first thing, figure out where the problem is happening. That will guide you to how you want to fix it. As a side note, you can also have duplicate groups. I don't know why these happen. It hasn't happened to me in a while, but let's just blame Apple syncing. Occasionally something gets goofed up and it defaults back to, let's just give them another copy of it. It's totally fine to delete them. You're going to have to delete them by hand. There's no way to automatically delete groups, look for duplicate groups and delete them. That covers most of the deduplication scenarios that you're going to run into. You can, after everything looks good, then I would recommend you turn on the connection to the internet again and let all of your data sync up. And as a final check, look at all your other devices and make sure you have the same number of contacts everywhere. There is a bug in the interface here whereby you should see at the very bottom of the list, I'm trying to show you this, but it won't scroll any further. There should be a number after the last letter of how many cards you have. It doesn't always show up. Sometimes it does, sometimes it doesn't. There is a way to get a count, and that's by selecting one of these and then going to select all of your contacts. And it will tell you on the right-hand side how many contacts you have on your Mac. And then when you look at your iPhone or iPad, if you scroll down, almost always I've seen the number of contacts listed at the very bottom of the list. And what you want to see after about 10 minutes is those numbers should be the same. They may be off by one, in which case I tell people don't panic. Off by one is fine. Usually that's because there's one card left here, and this card is related to the account on your Mac. It's automatically created. I wouldn't get rid of it. Just leave it there. It's going to throw off your count by one. That's perfectly fine. You don't need that particular address card in iCloud. You already have the address card up at the very top that's linked to your Apple ID. So that's it for merging. I know we got some more specific questions that I'll talk about. I do want to briefly touch on maintenance, but were there any questions about what I just went through there?
There was something someone asked about deleting the all months. If you want to answer that question, Dawn, if you have, if you can unmute your mic and ask your question.
Okay, I think I'm unmuted.
Yes, you are.
I have probably 50 groups, all called mail labels. And each one of those have over 1,000 contacts, and they're all the same. Is there a way to get rid of all of those labels? It's called mail labels. So I think that was generated by Apple.
It very much could be. If they are actually just groups, then what we're looking at is a listing under here, for example. The easy way to get rid of them is to select the group, and I tend to use the keyboard. You can hit the delete key, but I think you can also delete group under the edit menu. And if I go ahead and delete that, it'll give me a warning, and I say, yes, I want to delete the group, and it will go away.
Okay, I've been doing that, and I just get that rolling slow ball.
Okay, it sounds like something, like you said, is automatically creating that.
Yeah.
I think the first thing to figure out is, how the heck is that being created? Is it really the Contacts app, or is it perhaps another application on your Mac that is linking to the contacts data and is creating this? That's something that's a little bit harder to track down. Usually you would have had to give it some kind of permission to do that in the past, but it may be something that's quite old, that you haven't used in ages, you know, months or years and years, that suddenly has woken up and started to do this again.
Yeah.
I don't know if Microsoft products do this. Boy, back in the day, I certainly remember using the address book and Microsoft to link them together. So if you're running Microsoft Office on your Mac, that would be one place I would start.
No, I'm not.
Okay.
Okay, the other thing, is there a way I can select all of the mail labels at one time, or I have to manually do each one, which is very tedious?
Yes, you can. I don't know if select all works on this. No, it doesn't. Okay. So the way I would do it, unfortunately, I only have 3 groups to show you here, but the same idea will work. Select the first one in the list. So in this case, it's example. Then hold down the shift key and scroll down. I don't have to scroll in this port, in this case, to the last one in the list. Well, sorry, I only have 2 listed.
No, that doesn't work for me. For some reason, it says no cards.
Yeah, it's not working for me now either. I'm
Yeah.
afraid you are just resigned to hitting that delete key on each one of them.
Take the
Okay.
Mac offline while you're doing it. It may fix the repeat.
Yeah, that's the other thing. Again, this is major surgery. Make sure your computer is offline while you delete all of these.
Okay, thank
Duplication,
you.
yeah, it could also be occurring due to syncing somewhere. But, feel free to reach out to me privately in email and we can walk through some other ideas about why this might be appearing. Google is your friend sometimes. If you just search for that specific problem, like the group name, it might be that other people have had it and there might be a fix we can find out there for you.
Thank you, I will.
And Becky just made a comment. They spent over 2 hours with Apple support with using duplicates yesterday. 3 different experts, but they solved everything except groups. So, Susan asked about how to merge duplicates on iCloud. I don't think you can, or did you cover that?
You cannot. That is the most infuriating thing about this. iCloud has come a long way, but there is no resolved duplicates in iCloud.com, and there's no resolved duplicates on the Mac, on the phone, or even on the iPad. I really hope this is coming at some point. We have seen the Mac version of contacts become much more like the iOS version. So I'm hoping they're approaching the point where we're going to have the same features everywhere. Resolving duplicates, as you've seen, is tricky. There's a lot that has to go on and there's a lot that can go wrong. So Apple's been very cautious, I think, about opening that up to the masses of people who have iPhones, as opposed to the much smaller group that just has Macs. But I really hope it's coming. It's not there now.
Dennis just asked a question about disconnecting that you mentioned about Wi-Fi and Ethernet for the major surgery. Does it mean that all computers, all devices, all the ways that sync have to be turned off, that sync with that same database?
Usually what I do is I decide which one is going to be the king. And in this case, it's going to be my Mac. And that's the device I take offline, make the changes there. When those changes I'm happy with, I turn them on. And the idea is that they will sync up to the cloud, and then that sync will come back down to all my other devices. So if I'm not seeing major sync problems like prior to this, if everything is, I'm going to stop my sharing so I can see people. If prior to this, everything is in sync, like I've got the same number of contacts everywhere, I just know I have a mess, but it's all identical, then I usually won't bother turning sync off on all of my devices. I have occasionally helped clients whose sync is completely screwed up. We're seeing different numbers everywhere. In that case, I will turn all their devices off, work on the Mac, get that working. I will let that sync up to iCloud. In other words, I will go to iCloud.com then on that Mac and wait for the data to appear on iCloud.com. And when the data on iCloud.com matches what's on my Mac, then I will turn on the iPad and I will wait for that to sync, and when that one's matched up, then I will turn on the iPhone to make sure that's matched up. So it's a very sequential process. If you're having syncing issues, I recommend doing that, because then you can figure out which device is really the culprit here. And I will say, related to this is each device can have different accounts showing up in the contacts list. So when I showed you in preferences for contacts that we had the Gmail account that was showing contacts data, your phone and your iPad have the same options. And that can cause confusion as well, because especially when you're looking at different data sets, you don't realize that your phone, 2 years ago when you set it up, you connected it up to Gmail. And that's what's causing the different count in the contacts, and that's what may be causing apparent duplication. It's actually because that one device out of all the ones you have that you're using regularly, that's the only one that's showing two different accounts. And like everything, you have to go into the settings app under contacts in your affected device and check there. Which actually reminds me of one other thing I forgot to talk about related to this, which happens to relate to more to apparent data loss than duplication, which is, it's very easy to add a contact, say on your Mac, a new restaurant you're going to, head out, you're in the car, and suddenly your phone doesn't have this data on it. And you're like, I just added it. Why isn't it here? And you frantically try to refresh. Well, if your Mac is set up such that the default account is on my Mac, that data isn't going to sync. And you say, well, default account, we haven't even talked about this. Right. That's another thing in preferences for contacts on the home. So the general tab up here, if I click on that, down near the bottom is default account. It should generally be set to iCloud. For most of us, that's what we want as our default account. But often somehow it gets switched to on my Mac, or it even maybe switched to Google. If what's selected here is not what you're expecting, you can get very confused very easily. So that's the extra thing to check, especially if you're running more than one account. But even if you're not, make sure this is not set to on my Mac, because if you create a new entry in your contacts database and it sets on my Mac, it's not going to show up on any of your devices. So that hasn't happened to me in a long time, but it definitely happened to me in the past. And it's happened to some of my clients, because if you have multiple accounts, any device can have this problem. You will not see this option to choose a default account if you have only one account. So if you go into settings and look under contacts on your iPhone and you don't see default account, don't panic. It means that your phone only knows about one account. It's just going to assume that's your default, and it doesn't even bother to give you the option. But if you do have multiple accounts on your phone, make sure that it's set to the proper default account, which again, for most of us will be iCloud. All right, I'm glad I got to do that little addition.
Yeah. Randy, if you want to ask your question. If you're there, Randy.
Sorry, yeah, I was away for a second.
No worries.
Yeah, no, I mean, for a person who only has, iOS devices, I mean, if you don't have a Mac anymore, it sounds like you can't do some of these things because it's just on the Mac app. Is that true?
That's very true for the Contacts app. I hope to do a follow-up in the future talking about additional applications that can help you manage your contacts. But there was so much to cover in this basic in the Mac version of it. We decided that we'd be better off splitting it up. So it's possible that there are iOS apps out there that give you more views into your data, but I have not fully explored them yet because we're preparing a second topic on this. But it is a real bummer that the iCloud.com can't do any of this more sophisticated stuff yet. I hope. I say yet. We don't know for sure it's coming, but I hope so.
Yeah, because I used to do mail labels, and maybe I still can. I've got a really old version of the OS. I mean, my Mac is, I want to say 13 years old, so it's stuck on, I think it's OS 11, whatever that was.
Mm-hmm.
And I go by numbers, so I think we're on 15 or 16 now. So it's on. That's as far as I could update it. And I still certainly have Christmas lists and stuff, and I could do that on the Mac side, but I don't think I can do it in iCloud, right? I mean, that's not, I can't do mailing labels there.
Right.
So do I want to spend $1,000 just to do mailing labels? I mean, because that's what a new system will cost me. I mean, probably not.
Yeah, it's there definitely are different apps out there. And like I said, I haven't explored them recently, and because I can always fall back to the Mac, it hasn't been a high priority. But as all of these platforms converge, I really hope that some of these additional features begin to open up as iCloud improves.
Yeah, I'm still a little upset with Apple in that they gave us on the iPad for years iPhoto. not the Photos app, but iPhoto, which allowed me to create books. It had great editing features that you still don't have in the Photos app. I mean, there was a wonderful touch up. You could just take blemishes out of photos very easily. I mean, it was a really sophisticated app. You had to pay $5 for it, but I thought it was well worth the price. And I could create books. So I had vacations and weddings, and I could create nice books on Apple's site. And then they dropped support for that and changed it to Photos and took away a lot of the features. And there I am.
Yeah, the move to everything online has definitely caused a regression in functionality. And we are slowly pulling back out of that as they begin to build the features back in. I mean, I'm glad they're being cautious about it, because if they lose my contacts data, that's almost an unforgivable sin, right? I don't want that to go wrong. I'm glad they're being cautious, but it definitely can be frustrating to know that, boy, I really need a Mac to do this. And there are ways around it. You know, if you have a really old Mac, that also might be an issue in dealing with the syncing. Older Macs have much more tenuous connection to iCloud, but at least now, I mean, you would have the option of doing all of your data manipulation, exporting it, you know, on an ancient Mac, exporting it as a V card, assuming you can do that.
Yeah.
And then uploading it to iCloud.com for the import. In other words, don't even use your Mac for the sync, but upload it. You know, there is sort of a workaround.
And then, yeah, okay, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, and that's relatively new. You know, for a long time, you couldn't look at your contacts data at all. That just was, you know, you could look at your files and that was it. Then we got photo, you know, it's been spreading.
Yeah.
If there are any other questions, I see quite a
Thanks.
few things.
Go ahead, Ned, Becky. Yeah, ask your question.
Yeah, we had what turned out to be a very good session with Apple Support yesterday. As we mentioned, it's over 2 hours long. At one point, though, and I'd just like to make Margaret aware of this, and maybe she's very familiar with it, but they asked us to turn off our connection to iCloud and immediately a message popped up saying, okay, if you do this, I think it said you're going to have to download all your photos. I mean, obviously we're talking about contacts, but not photos. And we've got, I don't know, somewhere but north of 25,000 photos and stuff on cloud with a 2 terabyte subscription. And Margaret, if you're familiar with that and would like to maybe make some comments on it. Bottom line is we neglected to do that. And I think that was probably Apple's support way of saying, you know, how to disconnect sync. Because obviously if we disconnected sync, then we'd lose screen sharing and we'd lose contact with them. So I'm just tossing that out if that might be a warning for somebody else.
Well, that was one of the reasons it took 2 hours, because we only had a choice of either cancel out or download the photos, right?
Yeah. Let me just say one other thing. Margaret, you have shared more great information with us this morning than we learned at Apple Support. So if you ever need a second job during your sleep or something like that, I'm sure Apple Support would love to have you.
In fact, the first person I wondered how long they'd been working for Apple, because they seemed a little tentative and then said, well, I may have to consult my supervisor. So then she turned us over to her supervisor, who talked real fast, and it was kind of almost too fast.
Let's let Margaret answer.
No, but I want to say this about the photos. The scariest thing was the photos. And she was just kind of breezing past that. And we were like, wait a minute, we've got like all these thousands of photos we don't want to lose. It was like, oh, so it was definitely part of the reason it took so long, was we had to wait for all these photos.
I will say this, Apple was very patient with us. They were very courteous. It was an excellent experience. I can't imagine getting that kind of tech support anywhere else except for SCAU.
Yeah, that's the one good thing about keeping your data in iCloud as opposed to keeping it in Google, is that unless you're paying Google, you're going to be able to pick up the phone or do a support chat with somebody to sort out access to your most important data. I will say that I don't recommend that people turn off it, like log out of iCloud and then do a bunch of changes and then log back in, because of this exact reason, because your Mac or any device will panic and say, oh, what do you want me to do with the data? You want to keep a copy of it? Do you want to delete it? And people say, delete? I don't want to delete it. Well, the question is really delete it off your device, which if it's contacts data, that is a very small amount of data compared to photos. And it's fine to do that, but it definitely causes a bit of panic. it's way easier just to put the phone in airplane mode temporarily while you're doing this. However, if you're having sync issues, sometimes your only recourse is to log out of iCloud and log back in. And I did this dance repeatedly this week as I was trying to get this demo Apple ID up and running and out of the terrible limbo state it had been stuck in. And there was a lot of dancing back and forth, logging out, logging back in, and trying to get all the systems to recognize one another again. But yeah, the photos thing is the big killer because it takes up a lot of space. So, and it takes a lot of time to download all that data if it isn't already on device. If it's on device, it's still going to tell you it has to download it. But what it really means is, I'm going to assume you don't have it. So I'm going to tell you the worst case scenario that you have to download 25,000 photos. But what I'm really going to do is check through all of those photos and see which ones you already have. And if you already have it, I'm not going to make you re-download another copy. I'm just going to move on to check the next one and the next one and the next one. But with a large photo library, even the checking takes a long time, as you discovered. For contacts, it's way faster. And you can definitely turn on and off access to contacts data, but that's not the same as logging out. That is sometimes needed to kickstart everything.
Bob Fairbairn, you have your hand up. You wanted to ask a question?
Well, I have a couple things to talk about when we get closer to the end, so that's fine. I just,
I got
yeah.
one
Yep.
bigger surgery thing that I just want to touch on because
You
it
wanna
was a
say it?
question that was sent in advance.
Okay.
And I've run into this on a couple occasions. It mostly has to do with I'm going to talk about it in the most basic terms, which is husband and wife issues that have been sharing an Apple ID and they need to separate them. We've all been battling this for years because, as I said in the beginning, Apple doesn't want you to share a single Apple ID, but we know we've been doing it in the background. And at some point it breaks. And one of the common ways it breaks is over contacts. When the question that was asked here was about, you have one Mac that's got all the contacts on it. Husband and wife use that Mac. Both of them have access to everything. Husband has an iPhone, contacts are on his iPhone, great. Wife then decides, maybe I don't need this old flip phone anymore. I want to get an iPhone. Well, that iPhone is connected to her Apple ID. That's what Apple's going to force you to do, make your own Apple ID. So she no longer has access to all of those contacts. So what do you do in that situation? It's pretty straightforward. There are a number of steps, but it's what you would imagine. The gross outline is you export all the data out of the husband's account and you import it into the wife's account, right? That's how you're going to do it. It's going to be a one-time switch, but at least all of that data will get moved. I've helped a number of clients do this because it's a little tedious and you only have to do it once. So there's no reason for you to have to memorize how to do this or really learn it. It's a one-time thing, but there is a few procedures with this. Of course, the first one will be make sure the husband's data or the shared data is correct. The second one would be then you're going to need another account on that Mac for the wife to log into, because again, it's way easier to do this on a Macintosh. So the way I would recommend is create a second account, get that account hooked up to the wife's new Apple ID, make sure that contact data that's there, which probably she already has some because she's probably been creating it by hand just to get her iPhone to work for her. If there is data there, what's the first step? Make a backup of it, because if things go wrong, we want to be able to go back. Make a backup of the wife's data. Then I would say at the husband's account, or what is now going to become the husband's account, you want to export all of that data. And for this purpose, you could use either vCard format or the address book archive, the contacts archive. It's probably easier to use the contacts archive. It's the most likely to work. So I would export that. It's usually going to export to the desktop, your documents folder. The key is, how do you get that file to the other account on the Mac? There are two different ways. The easiest by far is to put it on a little external drive. It can even be just those little flash drives that you plug in. You don't need a big fancy drive because this data is not very big. Put it on that flash drive, drag the file over, then switch over to the wife's account. Because it's on an external drive, the wife's account will be able to see that external drive. There's no permissions issues or anything like that. In the wife's account, now what you're going to do is you're going to go into the edit menu. I think it's edit. No, it's under the file menu. You're going to import and you're going to select that archive and import all of those contacts over. And at this point, you might have duplicates. So then you would follow the procedure for trying to clear up duplicates. It may detect duplicates on the way in. That's fine. Clean them up as you go. When the wife's data seems to be right, that's when you would turn on internet connection again to that Mac and that account and let the wife's data sync up. So it's sort of that like encapsulates everything we've been talking about. This is a big switch. You only do it once. That's your answer to how to, quote, separate these two accounts. And then going forward, the husband and wife have to maintain their own data. When there's a change in the data, what I recommend at that point is sharing a V card. And I did have a couple of questions about how to share a contact between people. I find it's generally is most likely to happen when you're out and about. So let's think about how to do it on the iPhone. If you're looking at a particular record in the Contacts app, if you scroll down to the bottom, there are a number of words in blue, for lack of a better word. Those are technically buttons, and one of those is Share Contact. When you select Share Contact, then a screen will come up and you have a number of ways to share it. AirDrop works great if everybody understands what AirDrop is and doesn't have it locked down. A lot of people run with it locked down because there are security concerns. So if that's the case, I usually say, just text it to somebody. Chances are you know who you need to send this to, and you have them in your contacts list. Just hit, the iMessage button or the messages button there. A message sheet will open up. You can address it. It will automatically have the V card in there as part of the message. When you hit send, it will send the V card to them. And the recipient, all they have to do is look at the message and tap on the V card, just like you would tap on a photo to look at larger on your phone. And when you tap on it, your phone will ask you, what do you want to do with this? Do you want to import it or not? And that's how I generally keep data in sync going forward in the future. A similar situation happens in the reverse when you have one contact for a husband and wife. We did get a question about this. Again, Apple expects 1 to 1 to 1. So you need to split up that contact and get the correct wife's cell phone and husband's cell phone in each of those two contacts in your contacts list. And when you address a text message, then in the future, if you want to text both the husband and the wife, you will need to add the husband and then add the wife separately because they're separate. That's because when you're addressing a text message, it's going to pick one sort of field in the contacts, a database, to address that for each person. So if you have combined entries in your contacts database, it really behooves you to uncombine them at this point. Most of us don't have too many of those, but husband and wife usually is the thing, especially for older contacts. And suddenly the wife, like I said, the wife gets a phone and now you have to add her text number, make a new entry for the wife in your contacts database so you can text her directly. All right. So I think that covers it for all the questions we got in advance. I don't see any other new questions here. So if I want to talk about stuff in contacts, that'd be great.
Okay. The first thing, Margaret, I want to congratulate you on your over your shoulder automatic reposing statue. That is the most still cat I have ever seen. About every 3 minutes, it reposes. It's just wonderful.
I didn't check to see if he was doing that yoga pose with the leg in the air or doing anything. It might be a little risque for us, but I'm afraid
there was one point where the head was turned and it was looking at us and the ears were twitching. It was like, would you get off the phone? You're annoying me. Anyway, I love it. Thank you. I have this problem, and I'm sure others do, and I know you're talking about a second section, and I think it's important. It's living in multiple worlds. So normally I live in the Apple world, but sometimes I live in the Google world, and maintaining address books across two different ecosystems like that, whether it's Microsoft and Apple and Google and Apple or whatever it is that's a huge challenge. And I don't know if that's something that would be easily addressable or not, but I think it will be an interesting continuance of this subject. So, and some additional, looking around for additional software to manage contacts and stuff. I've been playing with something that I'm not super happy about yet. I don't, because I haven't used it enough, that works cross-platform we can talk about. I don't want to expand the subject to that yet, but I think a follow-on to this is really good because contacts is pretty basic, and thumbs up to not signing out of iCloud. That will really freak your poor little computers out. So yeah, that's all I wanted to talk about.
Yeah, I didn't talk too much about maintenance. It mostly means deleting old stuff. I mean, there's not a lot of other maintenance. We talked about major surgery. That's very clear when it needs to happen, but ongoing maintenance is also important. And for me, that mostly means looking at my list periodically and saying, I don't recognize this name. I have no idea why it's in here, and actually making the decision to delete it. I do that at downtimes during the day. I'll go through like a couple of months where I'll sort of be focused on clearing out old contacts data, and then I won't do it for 4 years. It's not something I do continuously, but it does help you to keep it a little bit more focused on the stuff you actually need. Looking at mine now, I have over 800 contacts in there. And I know there's a bunch in there that I have no idea what they are. The only way to currently find them is by scrolling through them, which is tedious, but it's not hard to do. So related to, what was just said, there are other applications out there, and one I've been playing with, which you might have heard of, is Busy Contacts. And we're talking about possibly doing a whole session on Busy Contacts, or maybe we'll roll it into a bunch of different apps. But one of the things that Busy Contacts can do is it can surface when the contact was created. This is data that Apple doesn't share with you, but does exist in their database. And that, I think, is going to be really helpful for me to go pull out these really old contacts and see which of these really need to stay. It'll help me quickly find some of the old expired data, I think. I will say their interface is something to be believed. It's very retro in some regards. The data is there, but it's a challenge to figure out how to surface it. Once it's showing to you, it stays showing, but it's so fully featured that's easy to get lost in the details. All right.
All right, guess we're open for just open questions. We have about 7 minutes left to the end of the meeting.
Okay, Dave, I have a quick question. Are you using a new camera? Because the resolution on you, I mean, you can see all the detail in your shirt. I mean, the color is wonderfully blue. I mean, it's much different than anybody else. And I'm just wondering if you've got a new camera or something that you're using.
I am using an iPhone. This is an iPhone XR.
Amazing.
And I'm using a program called Reincubate Camo, CAMO.
I've heard of it.
It's a subscription service, or you can buy a lifetime license for $79. And all you have to do is you connect your iPhone to your Mac and use this piece of software. There's an app that runs on the iPhone, and here I am. And this is actually, they've been doing this in beta. This is the portrait mode of the iPhone. So I've got that set right now, because you can see I have my camera looks kind of blurred in my background, and you can see my mic and my face, and everything is very defined. I'm actually using the portrait mode of the iPhone in order to take advantage of that.
Well, it's noticeable. So I thought I'd ask, because I noticed that your image was better than most. So I'm thinking it's got to be a different camera.
It is. Thank you.
Yeah. This is Tom. I have a quick question for Margaret. On my iPhone, I have my my iCloud contacts. I also have my Hotmail contacts. It's not possible to have those show up on the Mac. Is that correct?
That's a good question. It kind of depends on how open Hotmail, which is now owned by Microsoft, has been.
Outlook now.
Yeah, it's all in Outlook, and I don't know if you could even add that. It may be possible to. I will say that email programs maintain their own lists. So there's sort of two lists associated with these accounts. One can be actual like contacts data, and the other might be sort of what mail calls previous recipients. In other words, it keeps a running list of everyone that you have replied to. So if you blow away all your contacts, in some cases, it will still auto-populate when you're trying to address an email, for example, because those two sources of data are separate. I don't know how Hotmail, which has now become Outlook, behaves. Sometimes these older legacy ones are strange. It might be possible to log into that app in the Contacts app. You would have to just try it, I think. And you would do that. Let me share my screen here quickly. And you would do that in preferences for contacts. That's where I would try. And under accounts, when you select the plus button at the bottom to add a new account, you get this very, we've seen this list before. Anytime you're setting up a new account. If Microsoft Exchange doesn't work, which I don't know, it's worth a try with your Hotmail credentials, trying that. Otherwise, you could try other contacts account and see if logging in there will actually work. I'm afraid what might happen is just you can't ever get it to authenticate. And that's happened to me pretty frequently with older accounts, even Yahoo accounts. Sometimes I can't get them to actually accept the credentials that we know are correct. It's very frustrating for some of these old accounts. But that would be what I would try to do if you want to see those appear on your Mac.
Thank you.
My hand raised. I've got a raise on.
Yeah, it looks like you guys, Ed and Becky, you have a question?
I just have a 30-second commercial. If anyone's been looking to buy, what are these things called? HomePod minis. And you also happen to be a Costco member. They have them on sale now. Normally, of course, they're $100. They're on sale at Costco for $85, but I think today is the last day of the sale. But Becky and I bought a couple of them. I love them. I think they're minis. Costco member, go to Costco, you can buy it. They actually take them off the shelf there.
Only in the charcoal.
Yeah, they only have charcoal gray, but I'm sort of channeling my inner George Brooks here with the Tech Miser, but thank you.
Well, we can now walk from the kitchen to the dining room and hear the same music everywhere. We have stereo all over our house. It's really fantastic.
Are you satisfied with the sound, Ed? This is Randy.
Yeah, I am. I'll tell you what, even though I have 70 whatever they are old ears, I do have pretty good hearing aids, and it really is good. I mean, I actually listened to some symphonic music yesterday. I was having breakfast. Is it a big speaker experience? Would Bob Fairbairn think it was great? Probably not, but it works for me, and I'm surprised at how much bass and how much stuff you can get out of that small speaker.
Good to know.
I have a question. Margaret, you mentioned in context that I believe you said that it doesn't, the other devices doesn't pick up the smart groups or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
And did you say that that's true for like Apple Music and stuff too? Because like I had a lot of, in iTunes, a lot of smart groups where I like grouped music by the subject or whatever that was in the title, and I've had problems with it showing up, on my phone now because I originally created those on the Mac.
Yeah, my understanding is that I don't know about music. I know Photos has a smart album function that works very much the same, like a persistent search. That does not appear in iPad and iCloud.com, nor on the iPhone. It's been a while since I've looked at my smart groups in iTunes, but it wouldn't surprise me if they also don't sync. In other words, they just don't appear. We'd have to check that, but if you're having trouble with it, if they're actually not appearing, that would be why. They just don't exist, especially with the change between iTunes and music. Apple has been doing a lot of behind the scenes alteration of how we play music on all of our devices. So it wouldn't surprise me if that got lost in the shuffle. And again, I really hope this is all coming back because I use these things in multiple areas. I mostly miss it on photos, to be quite honest.
Margaret, one of the issues I had with groups, which I was released to just solve these on my own. I had a whole bunch of groups. Many of them involved SCAU because I used to send out the program flyers to so many people. I divided it into different groups so that it didn't get regarded as spam mail. But those groups were duplicated, and that was pretty easy to, see that they were the same. Then there was one that the group was actually there 7 times, and the first time and the 7th time it was populated. All the other ones were actually empty, which was really bizarre. I mean, that was easy to resolve, but it's so bizarre that that could have happened. And then there was one group that it was a SCAU group, but it had added somebody that I recognized the name that was totally from a different group. And it's like, why is that contact in that group? It was just so bizarre. So who knows? It was really weird.
Yeah, sync is hard. That's all I can say. And we know Apple's rocky history with sync and cloud. It definitely has gotten better and better and continues to improve. But when things go wrong, everything gets duplicated and duplicated and duplicated. And how do you stop it from happening? You can't. It's just one of those things you have to sort of clean up the mess afterward, try to avoid creating it. But the only way to do that really is to, when you're doing major surgeries, to take your devices offline.
Well, Margaret, on this same topic, I think one thing that could be said is that once you get it right, you probably want to export that also, so you now have a new starting point if things get wacky in the future.
Yeah, it's never a bad idea to even once a year just export everything. And if you want it the most cross-platform, what you really want is what's called comma separated values, a CSV file, which is basically, it's like a spreadsheet. I mean, it's just text. You will lose the photos. You have to lose the photos. If it's a true CSV file, it won't have that. But Apple does not give you the ability in the export menu to make a CSV file. So you definitely want to do that archive format. vCard can be imported by a lot of different places, but not Microsoft. Microsoft has signed off on the vCard thing. However, Google can, which is good. That gives you some flexibility because Google is a good intermediary for like dumping data in and then dumping it back out in a different format. They're really good at that. But I did find one totally wacky trick for making a CSV file that is just a spreadsheet of all your contacts data. It only works on the Mac. Do you guys want to see it? Because I was amazed this worked.
Let's
We love
let's
amazing.
let's go ahead and wrap up the main meeting here, and we can move this over to the afterglow if that's okay.
Yep.
So let's go ahead and do that. Let me go ahead and close out the meeting here, and we'll stop the recording. I want to thank you, Margaret, for an amazing presentation. I think everybody really enjoyed it, and really appreciate everything that you did today. And everybody is very pleased with what you've provided. So thank you so much, and thanks to all the members and everybody being here for enjoying this, and I hope you enjoyed it as well. We are going to be going on summer vacation or hiatus for the next 2 months. So our main meetings and special interest groups will be taking off for summer break starting at today. And we will be back in September of 2021. So beginning of September, we should have some more events, and the main meeting, iPhone, special interest group, Tech SIG, and Photography SIG will all be back. But until then, yeah, we wanted to take a little bit of a break so we can recharge our batteries and be ready for bringing you some more great stuff in the fall. So we just want to make sure everybody is aware of that. And again, I hope you enjoyed the presentations, and I hope everybody has a great day, and thank you.